Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we have the case of Lauren McCluskey. Lauren McCluskey was born on February 12, 1997 in Berkeley, a city located in Alameda County, California, across from San Francisco. Lauren was the second daughter of the marriage between Jill and Matt McCluskey, two renowned university professors in their respective fields. Jill, who had graduated in 1989 with a degree in economics and political science from the University of California at Santa Barbara, was not content with just her bachelor's degree. She immediately traveled to Washington to pursue her first master's degree in economics at Georgetown University, which she completed around 1993. But she didn't stop after that master's degree either. That same year, Jill traveled to Berkeley to study for a second master's degree in science and a bachelor's degree in agricultural and resource economics. The truth is, we don't know much about her relationship with Matthew McCluskey, but although both studied at the University of California at the same time, they didn't meet until well into the 90s, when they crossed paths again in Berkeley, where Matt was studying to earn a degree in physics. Since we don't have details about their relationship, we don't know exactly when they got married or when their first son Ryan was born, but by 1997, when Lauren was born, not only had they already started a family, but they had also begun working in the fields they had studied. Jill began working as a teaching assistant in certain economics classes, and Matt had joined the university's research laboratory. The couple's intention was to stay in Berkeley, where they already had their lives organized. However, without even looking for it, 18 months after Lauren was born, Jill received a job offer from Washington State University, commonly known as WSU, that was impossible to refuse. She was offered her first position as the main professor for a course called Industrial Organization and Food Microeconomics, where she was expected to address topics ranging from the quality of food produced by a company to proper labeling, consumer perception, and behavior, among others. Although this was a huge responsibility for Jill's career, she was well aware that it was not a decision she could make alone, much less take lightly, considering she had a family and that moving would mean Matt would have to leave his job. So she shared the offer with her husband, only to be greatly surprised that the same university had contacted him to offer him his first position as an assistant professor in the physics department. Delighted to be able to start a new chapter of their careers together, the couple accepted the positions they were offered and began preparations to move to Pullman, the city where the university is located and where their two children would grow up. In this new city, Matt and Jill made sure to create a warm home where their children could not only grow up, but also have fun and play. So naturally, they chose a house with a large yard where the siblings spent much of their childhood playing. According to her parents, as a child, Lauren was quite shy. She had trouble making friends, and often, instead of socializing or playing with other children, she would choose to climb trees. For Jill, an attentive and almost overprotective mother, this was the first sign that her daughter was an athlete. Beyond her interest in climbing trees and walls, Lauren, like most children, loved animals, and her caring, sweet, and very sensitive personality led her to ask her parents for permission to volunteer at an animal shelter. Moved by her request, Matt and Jill looked for an organization that would accept volunteers Lauren's age and finally found one at the Whitman County Humane Society, where Lauren began helping to socialize newly rescued cats to make their adoption easier. It was while volunteering there that she met the two animals who would become her pets. First, Fuzzy, with whom she fell head over heels in love, and later Victory, the latest addition to the McCluskey family. Knowing that their daughter liked sports, her parents began signing her up for different activities of that kind when she was still a child. And although Lauren enjoyed all of them, at the age of 8 she began to stand out in track and field. At that age, she joined the National Youth Track and Field Team for the first time, participating in the Children's Olympics. But she didn't just participate. She set records in high jump, long jump, and the 400-meter race. Based on her performance in those games, USA Track, that is, the American Track and Field Team, informed her that she could participate in the following year's nationals in the 9 and 10-year-old group as long as she managed to qualify. Lauren, who had always been extremely determined since she was little, began to compete nationally in high jump events and other disciplines with the goal of earning enough points to qualify for nationals. But not only did she manage to qualify, she did so while being recognized as one of the top 8 youth athletes in the country, breaking several under-20 records, many of which still stand today. Although balancing her athletic career with being a normal child wasn't necessarily easy, thanks to the support and care of her parents, Lauren managed to navigate the rest of her childhood and adolescence with relative normalcy. At no point did she stop studying or doing other activities she enjoyed. For example, she continued volunteering at the animal shelter, and as she grew older, she went on to do volunteer work with other social organizations, including the Special Olympics. Back to athletics. In her first year of high school, Lauren was crowned Washington State champion in high jump and runner-up in the 100-meter hurdles, achieving equally strong performances in the following years. This led to her, in her junior year of high school, what is known in the United States as junior year, being offered a spot in the Spire program at Andrew Osborne Academy. This program is designed for outstanding athletes, where not only are they taught what they would typically learn in school, but they are also helped to train and improve in their sport. Lauren attended that academy for a year, and although she really enjoyed dedicating so many hours to training, she also missed her family, since the academy was in Ohio. After finishing the school year, Lauren chose to return to Pullman, where she continued studying at a regular high school, while still participating in various track and field events and even setting records, such as in 2015, when she ranked among the top 10 in the Washington Heptathlon. Even before she finished high school, several universities approached her and her parents to offer her an athletic scholarship at their institution. Lauren was without a doubt a rising star in track and field, and every university wanted her to be part of their team, so the offers kept coming in. But both she and her parents decided not to make any agreements with any university until her graduation was closer. Graduating with honors from Pullman High, Lauren finally chose the scholarship that the University of Utah, located in Salt Lake City, had offered her. Lauren didn't have to worry about the costs of the degree she wanted to pursue, she just had to choose. So officially, at the beginning of 2016, she chose to enroll in communications. Since her early school years, she had stood out for her way of expressing herself, especially when it came to writing, and that's why one of the first classes she signed up for at university was grammar. She took several more classes for pleasure before choosing a specific path for her degree. She decided that she wanted to dedicate herself to international relations, and with that in mind, over the next 2 years, she trained to be able to get a job in that field. As for sports, Lauren continued to shine during college, breaking records and setting new ones while advancing in her studies and doing internships in different places. By 2018, at 21 years old, Lauren had her career completely on track. If everything went according to her plans, she would graduate with excellent grades in the spring of 2019, something her parents were extremely proud of. Although their daughter was still quite introverted, it was no longer so difficult for her to make friends. Beyond being shy at first, once she felt comfortable, Lauren was a very fun girl who loved to go out partying and especially enjoyed karaoke nights, activities that didn't seem to match the rather serious and reserved personality she showed to those outside her group of friends. Everyone was convinced that Lauren had a great future ahead of her, whether she chose to pursue a career in communications or, on the other hand, decided to become a professional athlete. No one seemed to doubt that she would excel at whatever she did. Unfortunately, her future was cut short from the moment she met John Fields. As I mentioned before, Lauren, like most people her age, really enjoyed going out dancing or having a drink when she wasn't busy studying or training with the track team. Usually, she and her group of friends would go to the same nightclub downtown, where the prices were affordable and everyone liked the music they played. By that time, in the fall of 2018, Lauren was single, and although she was open to having fun, she wasn't looking for a relationship or anything serious. But as the saying goes, you can't control who you're attracted to, much less who you fall in love with, and Lauren was no exception to that rule. During her visits to the bar, she discovered that there was a new young man working as security, who caught her eye from the very first moment. She spent weeks talking to her friends about him and begging them to go to the bar with her more often than usual. Finally, after weeks of watching him from afar on Sunday, September 2nd, 2018, encouraged by her friends, Lauren worked up the courage to approach the guy, introduce herself, and hand him a piece of paper with her phone number, asking him to call her. John Fields, the security guard whom Lauren had approached, happily accepted the phone number and, delighted by the confidence with which she came up to him, made sure to keep talking with her for the rest of the night so he could get to know her a little better. As they chatted, they realized that not only were they physically attracted to each other, but they also shared several things in common, such as their studies. John told Lauren that he was studying communication sciences at a community college in Salt Lake City, and since he didn't have any support from his family, he worked as a security guard not only at that bar, but at several places in order to support himself. Among the many things he told her about himself that night, John claimed to be 28 years old. However, just like his supposed college studies and even the name he had given her, it was all a lie. But Lauren didn't find out until several weeks later, After talking for several hours that Sunday night, they both came to the conclusion that they wanted to see each other again. And so they went out on several dates, after which Lauren always came back happy. Every time she returned to the dorm room she shared with her friends on campus, she would talk about how much she liked John and how well he treated her. As the days went by and Lauren kept going on dates with the security guard, her feelings for him grew, and she even confessed to her friends that she was waiting for the moment when he would ask her to be his girlfriend. Which is exactly what happened just a week and a half after that first conversation at the bar on September 2nd. Lauren, excited, had shared the news with both her friends and her mother, with whom she spoke at least once a day, every day. Obviously, everyone around her was happy to see her so joyful, but they all seemed to agree that the relationship was moving extremely fast. However, aside from an intense romance, they didn't see any red flags at the time, although that didn't last long. The first to realize that her daughter's boyfriend wasn't as perfect as Lauren claimed was Jill. Although her daughter hadn't lived with them for almost 3 years, they still had a very close relationship, and Lauren still told her everything that happened in her daily life, including things about her relationship with John. It was thanks to the fact that they were always in touch and that Lauren was honest with her and her husband that Jill realized the emotional dependency her daughter had developed on a young man she had met just a few weeks earlier. If John didn't call her, Lauren would have a terrible day and her mood was clearly affected. And if John called or texted her, he became her priority, and she would drop whatever she was doing to give him her full attention, even if she was in class or training. Lauren would literally stop everything to talk to her boyfriend. Although Jill and Matt were among the first to point out to their daughter that this wasn't normal behavior, they weren't the only ones. Alex, one of Lauren's best friends, had started to notice several behaviors from John that she didn't like at all. For example, that Lauren always had to be available for her boyfriend and even organize her daily routine around him. John demanded that Lauren pick him up from work every night because she had a car. The problem wasn't just that he would get angry if she didn't do it, but also that his shift ended at 2 in the morning, just a few hours before her first classes. On the few days that Lauren didn't go to pick him up at the bar, John would constantly send her messages to find out where she was, who she was with, and, not satisfied with her answers, he would demand that she send photos with her roommates or other people to prove she was telling the truth. Naturally, Alex thought that her friend's boyfriend was dangerously jealous and possessive, something she had tried to tell Lauren on several occasions. But Lauren, who had never had a boyfriend before, downplayed her friend's comments, insisting that these were actually romantic gestures that showed John was in love with her and cared about her. I think it's worth clarifying that these are not romantic gestures and have nothing to do with romance. In fact, it's a very controlling attitude, and no one should treat another person that way. Especially that complete and utter disregard, asking someone who is about to get up to study to come pick you up, preventing them from getting proper rest. That is not love. Since she knew that Alex didn't like John at all and already disapproved of her relationship with him, Lauren started talking about her relationship with Carmen, another friend to whom she confessed that she had argued with John because of his constant attempts to control her. During the argument, her boyfriend had yelled at her and stormed off angrily, which made her feel like he was right and that she was actually overreacting. Obviously, Carmen reminded her that this wasn't the case and tried to make her friend see reason. But Lauren, blinded by love, refused to listen to her and continued with her relationship. Most nights, John would stay with Lauren on the university campus as a way to make sure she didn't spend time with other people during the day. But when he realized that his girlfriend's dorm mates had started to look at him with suspicion, he put another strategy into practice. On the days he was on campus with Lauren, he would casually start conversations with other students and end up becoming friends with them. He didn't do this to expand his social circle, but rather to have eyes on the university. Since he wasn't a student there, he couldn't enter the campus unless he was with Lauren, so having friends who lived and or studied there was a way to keep tabs on his girlfriend. He could ask his friends where Lauren was, if they had seen her with someone, or simply confirm that his girlfriend was telling him the truth without her knowing. Although neither Lauren nor those around her knew this, in the following weeks, the concern for Lauren only continued to grow. The girl who had always been full of energy and enthusiasm seemed more and more drained. She started missing her early morning classes and there were always dark circles under her eyes. It was clear that going out every night to look for John was having negative effects on her. But like the rest of the comments her friends and family had made about her relationship, Lauren ignored them. Things got even stranger a few days later when she told them that John wanted to give her a gun to carry when she went to pick him up at night, which clearly caught all her friends' attention. First of all, because they didn't understand why it was necessary for her to carry a weapon when the bar wasn't in an unsafe area. In fact, Salt Lake City is considered one of the safest cities in the country. But John's insistence that Lauren get a gun wasn't the worst part. It was the way he intended to give it to her. He didn't want her to get it legally. Instead, he wanted to give her one he already owned. Alex, who was becoming increasingly suspicious of her best friend's boyfriend, didn't hesitate. She knew that the gun John intended to give her friend hadn't been purchased legally, and she was convinced that John could be dangerous, so she reported the situation to campus security. Unfortunately, they didn't pay much attention to her. Despite the comments from those around her and everyone's concern, Lauren continued dating John until the first week of October, when, due to a slip on his part, she discovered all the lies he had told her. On the morning of October 9th, after John left following the night he had spent with her, Lauren began tidying up the bedroom. While she was doing this, she discovered a wallet that wasn't hers, so she opened it to see if it belonged to one of her roommates, or if maybe Sean had forgotten it. Inside, there were several cards, even an ID with her boyfriend's photo, but the name wasn't Sean Fields. It was Melvin Sean Rowland. And by the way, Sean and Sean were spelled differently. The name was similar, but one was spelled S-E-A-N and the other, the real one, was spelled S-H-A-W-N. Still, that wasn't the only thing he had lied about. He had also lied about his age because she saw the date of birth and he wasn't 28 years old. Confused, the young athlete decided to search the name Melvin Sean Rowland on Google to find more information about him. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but it was definitely not what she expected. Her boyfriend's real name appeared on various news sites for being a sex offender, having even been in prison for attempting to assault a woman and later a child. In addition to discovering that he was on the sex offender registry, Lauren confirmed that Melvin was not 28 years old, but actually 16 years older than her. In other words, he was 36. Lauren decided that she had to end her relationship with that lying man. She told her best friend what she had discovered, and that night, when Sean, or Melvin, whichever you prefer, arrived at the dorm room in the residence, both girls confronted him about his lies. The man, who was nearly 40 years old, tried to justify all of this and begged his girlfriend for forgiveness, but Lauren did not give in to his pleas, making it clear that they had to break up. Despite this, she allowed him to stay that night in the dorm room since it was late and the idea of a farewell seemed to be the only way for Melvin to understand that their relationship was over. The next morning, Melvin asked to borrow her car to go back home and promised to leave it in a public parking lot that was about halfway between his house and the campus, an arrangement that Lauren told her mother about as soon as he left the dorm room. Jill, who couldn't believe everything her daughter had told her, didn't think it was a good idea for her daughter to go off campus to retrieve her car. So as soon as she hung up with Lauren, she called the Utah campus police. She told them about her concerns as well as, of course, Melvin's history as an abuser. The campus security department understood Jill's concern, so they decided to send an officer to accompany Lauren to the parking lot where Melvin was going to leave the car. On that occasion, the girl had no major problems retrieving her vehicle, but the breakup was not going to be that simple. In the days following the breakup, Lauren began receiving messages from various friends of her ex-boyfriend who tried to make her feel guilty for leaving him. They started by asking her questions like, "Why did you leave him? Why did you do this to him?" Lauren's friends advised her not to respond since there was a possibility that it was Melvin himself writing to her from different phone numbers. The messages kept coming and Lauren continued to ignore them, so Melvin and his friends, or perhaps just him, changed their strategy. After several days without getting a response from the girl, the messages began to claim that Melvin had been in a serious car accident, but Lauren quickly realized it was a lie. There was no news in Salt Lake City about a serious car accident as the messages claimed. Moreover, Melvin was still active on his social media, so the girl concluded that this was just a poor attempt to get her to talk to him. Since those messages didn't get a response, they escalated further, asking her if she was going to the funeral, implying that Lauren's ex-boyfriend had died. Already tired of the ridiculous number of messages she was receiving and the illogical lie, the athlete responded for the first time, "I know he's alive. Please leave me alone and stop writing to me. I've already notified the police." Fed up with the whole situation, Lauren had gone to speak with the campus police. Although they agreed that what was happening wasn't right since the messages weren't violent or threatening, they couldn't intervene legally. However, they made sure to ask her to come back and talk to them if the situation escalated. And it escalated much faster than expected. The next day, October 13th, Lauren received a much more aggressive email. Although the sender was anonymous, she was convinced it came from her ex or one of his friends, since they threatened to leak compromising photos of her if she didn't send them $1,000. Terrified that those photos taken in private could be made public, Lauren gave in to the blackmail and sent them the money, although she realized that this didn't guarantee anything, so, still nervous, she went back to the campus security office. Since blackmailing someone for money is a crime, the campus police took Lauren's report and assigned the case to a detective who came up with a frankly ridiculous hypothesis, as he believed that Melvin's phone had been hacked and that, just like her, he was also being extorted to send money to the hackers so they wouldn't leak those photos, which makes a lot of sense. He's an expert, the detective is an expert in his field. Outraged and encouraged by everyone around her, Lauren also decided to report the situation to the Salt Lake City police, meaning she went outside the university's jurisdiction. But they informed her that they couldn't help, since the events were under the jurisdiction of the campus police. That agency had continued investigating the case. Although they were convinced of their hypothesis, they had discovered that Melvin had been in several places near the campus multiple times a day on different occasions. All this while the threatening and violent emails and messages kept coming to Lauren, who since October 13th had called the campus police office at least 6 times to report all these messages she had received and also to find out if there was any progress in the investigation. Despite her persistence and the dozens of pieces of evidence she tried to add to her complaint, the answer she was always given was the same: "We're working on it." Lauren had to go in person to the police to follow up on her complaint because the way they spoke to her made her feel like she was being a nuisance, but no one did anything. Later, it would be discovered that Melvin had been lurking around trying to cover up his identity. On October 19th, 3 days before the murder, a woman was harassed at a Halloween costume party. A man dressed as the famous Marvel character Deadpool approached her, grabbed her by the waist, and tried to force her to kiss him, telling her he wouldn't let her go unless she did. However, that's not the strangest part, since at 4 in the afternoon on that same October 19th, the camera in Lauren's university dorm room captured a man dressed as Deadpool pacing back and forth as if he was thinking about going in, but was very hesitant. It should also be noted that the man was carrying a black bag in which it was clearly visible that he had a heavy object. But above all this, during the time Lauren was trying to talk to the police, her ex-boyfriend could see everything happening in her email, because sometime before, she had logged in from Melvin's phone and he saved the password. So not only was he stalking her physically, but he also had access to much of her online information, including her conversations with the police. And so the days went by until the events took place on October 22nd. After days without any news from the investigators, that morning Lauren received a call from a campus police officer inviting her to meet and discuss the progress of the case. The girl found it odd that the officer had not introduced himself and that his voice did not sound familiar, so to make sure it was true, she called the police office to ask if they had called her. There they confirmed to her that no one had contacted her from there, so they advised her not to answer calls from that number again, since it was probably Melvin reaching out from another phone. Although just a few hours earlier her ex had tried to contact her using lies, that day Lauren felt strangely calm. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of anxiety and fear, but that morning the athlete decided to get on with her life by focusing on her classes and having a good day. Meanwhile, Melvin was walking around campus with his black bag, which contained a gun, the same one he showed to one of the university students he tried to befriend. Lauren left class around 6 in the evening and, as she had promised her mother that morning through text messages, called her to catch up while she walked the distance between the classroom building and the residence where her dorm room was. Jill described the call as one of the happiest they had had in days. Lauren sounded hopeful, practically ready to leave her ex completely in the past. They talked about how she was doing in her classes and about when she would travel to Pullman to visit them. But that seemingly happy call took an unexpected turn when Lauren suddenly screamed in the middle of the conversation and immediately began nervously calling for help. Jill, who until then had been exercising while her daughter spoke on speakerphone, immediately stopped what she was doing and tried to get Lauren to tell her what was happening, but the phone seemed to have fallen, and although her daughter could no longer hear her, the economist was able to hear the young woman's distant screams. Thousands of kilometers away, Jill witnessed Lauren being kidnapped without being able to do anything at all. Refusing to hang up the call, it was Matt who used his cell phone to call 911 and also the campus police. The state police quickly dispatched several patrol cars to search the surrounding areas, while at the same time several officers on foot searched for Lauren with tracking dogs in the various university buildings. No one understood what was happening since the students had not been informed of the situation, which led to various rumors starting to spread. These only grew when, several hours later, some claimed to have heard gunshots. This, combined with the large police presence on campus, fueled the theory that they were under threat of a shooting, which in turn increased the widespread panic among the students. The situation escalated to such a degree that campus police had to make an announcement to calm everyone down, speaking through the loudspeakers located in various places around the campus. They announced that a student had been kidnapped while on campus and that both the state police and campus police were searching for her. For some reason, in this first announcement, the identity of the student was not revealed, but Lauren's friends who knew about her situation immediately realized it was her. This was confirmed when they tried to contact her and she did not answer her phone. Feeling powerless to do anything but wait, Lauren's friends got in touch with her parents who, desperate about the whole situation, had already bought 2 plane tickets to go to Salt Lake City. Although it was the fastest way to get there, the flight took almost 9 hours, during which Jill and Matt were completely out of contact, hoping their daughter was safe. Unfortunately, 5 minutes before 10 at night and after 3 uninterrupted hours of searching, the city police found a black car abandoned in one of the university's parking lots. As they approached, they noticed the silhouette of someone in the back seat, a girl who did not respond to the officers' attempts to get her to open the car. Given the situation, the police opened the vehicle and discovered that the young woman they had seen was actually dead and matched the physical description of Lauren McCluskey. At first glance, the police counted 7 gunshot wounds. Once again, it was announced over the loudspeakers that the missing student had been found. Unlike the previous announcement, this time they did mention Lauren by name and also provided both the name and physical description of her ex-boyfriend, since he was clearly the main suspect and, at that moment, a very dangerous person whom students needed to be wary of. On the other hand, inside the car, the police had also found a Deadpool character mask, which made sense once they were able to review all the footage from the cameras at Lauren's dorm entrance. As part of the security operation, campus police decided to send Melvin's photo to all students' cell phones. The intention was that if they saw him around campus, they would be able to identify him and alert the authorities. The idea itself was good, but it ended up causing more fear among the students, who had to spend the early morning hours witnessing the campus searches for a murderer the police believed was still there. During their sweep of the various buildings, the police went through classrooms, offices, and even dormitories, so the church located on campus was not going to be left out of the search. When they headed there and tried to enter, they realized the doors were locked from the inside, so they had to force them open to get in. When they finally managed to do so, they found Melvin's lifeless body. He had taken his own life using the same weapon he had used to murder Lauren. Although Melvin was no longer alive and therefore could not be officially charged with Lauren's death, much less serve a sentence for what he had done, the police still had to investigate the events and how they had occurred. They decided to start the investigation by looking into how and when Melvin had entered the campus because, remember, he could not get in without someone else's help. To do this, they had to review the footage from the dozens of cameras located throughout various places on the university campus. They paid special attention to the cameras near the residence where Lauren lived, and thanks to those recordings, they were able to see how the killer was outside the dormitory building as if he were waiting for someone. The cameras had captured how Melvin confronted the girl as she arrived at her building and how he later shot her. The scene was extremely cruel to watch, but it raised several questions for the detectives, such as where he got the weapon and who the killer really was. A simple search of his first and last name in police databases brought up a series of criminal records, which the girl was evidently already aware of. According to his file, Melvin had spent the last 10 years in prison for various sexual offenses, and although his sentence was much longer due to his good behavior, let's remember, I mentioned this in a lot of cases, suddenly good behavior becomes a key factor that allows these people to get out and commit murder. And because he had shown good behavior during his last stint in prison, he was granted parole on more than one occasion. The first 2 times Melvin violated the conditions he had to comply with in order to remain free. They gave him a 3rd chance. This is ridiculous. It was on this 3rd chance that he met Lauren. The fact that Melvin's criminal record was only discovered at that point showed how little attention the campus police had paid to the complaints Lauren had made in the days leading up to the incident. A simple search of his name in police systems would have let them know that Lauren was being harassed, threatened, and blackmailed by a man who was clearly violating the terms of his parole. In other words, if campus police had taken Lauren's pleas for help seriously, Melvin would have been sent back to jail immediately and would not have had the chance to end his ex-girlfriend's life. Obviously, knowing that Lauren's death could have been prevented sparked a wave of outrage, not only among those who knew her, but it also resonated throughout the entire country. Both the media and the public began to pressure university authorities, demanding that they take responsibility for the poor conduct of their police force and how this had influenced the outcome of events. And it's not just that they ignored Lauren, but also, somehow, he managed to get onto campus. A person they were supposed to be wary of was suddenly able to enter without any trouble. He was able to enter with a weapon without any problem. Although the police held several press conferences trying to excuse their actions, their explanations were not enough to ease the anxiety felt by students and their families. Being on campus no longer seemed safe, considering that this criminal had repeatedly entered, harassed one of the girls, and then ended her life right there on campus. But the outrage was only just beginning. Jill and Matt wanted to know exactly how the campus police officers had acted. With the help of a private investigator, they gained access to the reports and the file of their daughter's complaint, as well as other official documents. There they discovered that in 2019, the person who had taken Lauren's complaint about the threats to leak her intimate photos had saved those photos on his own phone and had even shown them to several of his co-workers. The McCluskeys not only reported his behavior to the authorities, but also made their discovery public to raise awareness about how a supposed law enforcement officer had taken advantage of their daughter in a moment of vulnerability. Unfortunately, the officer who had kept the photos was no longer working there, so he could not be formally sanctioned. The rest of the officers involved in the distribution of the photos, or at least those who saw them, were fired for their actions. And although they agreed with the measure taken, Lauren's family still believed that it was necessary for their daughter's case not to end there. So they decided to file a civil lawsuit against the University of Utah. After a shortened trial, the court ruled in favor of the McCluskeys, and the educational institution was ordered to pay the sum of $10.5 million for how its mistakes had indirectly contributed to Lauren's fate. With part of the money they received, the couple created a foundation in their daughter's name with the goal of providing support and safety to people across the country who, like Lauren, were victims of violence in their romantic relationships. The University of Utah was one of the first to donate to the foundation, giving them the sum of $3 million. As for other legal repercussions, in July 2019, Nathan Bugel, 21 years old, was accused of being the person who had given the murder weapon to Melvin. He was found guilty and sentenced to 3 years of probation under a strict regime, which, if not followed, would result in imprisonment. In addition to him, Sarah Emily Lady was also brought to justice in this case, as it was determined that she was the one who had illegally purchased the murder weapon. However, unlike Nathan, she did not go to trial. The case against her was closed after she agreed to participate in a 12-month rehabilitation and safety program. Returning to the university campus police, Lauren's death does not seem to have changed much, at least as far as is known. No new protocols have been implemented to address reports of gender-based violence or online threats like those Lauren experienced. Despite the economic consequences her death had for the university, it does not appear that the institution has truly changed the way it responds to these kinds of issues. And while the authorities try to leave the case behind, every day on campus you can see professors, students, and even staff members wearing a pin with the phrase "Lauren's Promise," a way not only to remember her, but also to show that whoever wears it is open to listening, helping, and supporting anyone who is being abused or mistreated. An initiative that, although it did not originate from the Lauren McCluskey Foundation, shares the same goal and keeps her memory alive. And with that, we've reached the end. It's not a satisfying ending. In fact, I would say it's quite the opposite. Not only was justice not served, but it was later discovered that those who were supposed to help her disrespected her in a terrible way. So I'm sorry to leave you with this feeling. But anyway, let me know what you think down in the comments. I'm reading them.